Are you having trouble figuring out how to story build? Do you even need to story build? Let's figure it out together. Thank you guys for tuning back into the Dreaded Twitch channel for another episode of Writing Wednesday. Last week we talked about outlining, this week it's all about world building. When I first sat down to world build, I felt very overwhelmed. It felt like this huge impossible task that I didn't really know how to tackle. So I started by making a list of what things I thought consisted of world building. And today I'm going to be sharing some of those things with you guys. There are some things that I took for granted. I knew that the world that my story is centered around is very Earth-like, so even though it's not on Earth, the seasons that I'm including and the landscapes that I'm including are basically just a recombined version of what we see around us. I also knew that gravity and physics would work fairly the same, so when I was going in and describing things, I didn't have to figure out how something would fall if it was on a different planet with a different level of gravity. The next thing I did was I got really into the specifics of what species and races that I had in my world. I have two humanoid races, of which those are human and elves. So I started laying out all of the physical traits that consisted of those races, i.e. hair color, skin tone, eye color, and those sort of things. Knowing I wanted to have a magic system in the story, which I will get more into that later in the video, I laid out how those characteristics affected both of the races. I also am including two different kinds of vampires in the story, so I laid out how those attributes affected both races, and then on top of that, I wrote down all of the possible combinations, and I wrote down what the most likely characteristics that person would have. I also worked out what cultural differences existed between the humans and the elves. These differences being the government systems, the social hierarchy, and religion, and anything that you can really think of that comes to mind when you think of a specific culture. I did this not only to make my world seem even that much more real, and to provide some unique experiences for my characters, but that also plays a role into how my different characters will act, as well as affecting the plot and the world history. Now for the world history, I have a fair chunk of my book bible dedicated to this, in which I talk about the different wars that happened, how the different races got to this continent, and what they did to figure out a government system that worked for them. Another thing that you could put here is where the different dialects are. If there are people in a certain area that have a different inflection than people in another area, you can specify that out too. And speaking of language, I'm actually in the process of creating a language for my elves. I also do not have the time to spend on that topic in this video, however keep an eye out for a video about creating a language in the future. And finally, to the magic! So even from the very beginning, I knew that I absolutely wanted to have a magic system in this story. However, I knew that I didn't want it to be this thing where you could just do anything, create anything out of nothing. I wanted there to be some consequences for the actions that you choose to use magic for. There are also some hereditary things that apply to how magic works in my world, however I'm not going to get into that today. But some of the consequences with magic in my world is you can astrally project somewhere if you've been there before. You can teleport an object somewhere if you've been there before. However, you cannot teleport a live being. There's something about the process where everyone who has tried to transport themselves or another living thing, the object does go to that location. However, when they arrive at that location, they are dead. Another kind of big thing to world building is creating a map for your world and story, which is another huge topic which I don't have time to get into today, and I will be doing a video on in the future. So that's the basics of how I started world building for my story. Is there anything that you are concerned about that I didn't get to in this video? Throw down a comment and let me know. Don't forget to like and subscribe for writing videos on Wednesdays. Also, I'm working on a Overwatch highlight video, which will be coming out in the next couple days. Peace.